Welcome, everyone. And I'm really glad you can join us on this webinar where we are looking at the end of the Frankenstack and why hospitality tech is consolidating. And to give you a bit of context, for those of you that don't know us, Abode Worldwide is a strategic public relations and communications agency specializing in hospitality tech. And we just published a few weeks ago our annual Hospitality Tech Investment Index. And what we looked at was the last 12 months of investment funding into hospitality tech. Within that 12 months, 40 companies were invested in, and these are 40 that publicly give that information that they have been invested in. So we looked at and analyzed the 40 companies that have had funding and investment over the last 12 months. And we looked at the funding from a few different kind of paradigms, if you like, and a few different sort of viewpoints. One was at what stage was the fund, what stage was the business for the funding, what age was the business for the funding, and then also geographic location as well. And then one of the things that we looked at, which is what will be the topic of this particular webinar, is what category was the most funded. And in the $1 billion of funding over the last 12 months, almost half of that went to property management systems. And so 7 companies over the last 12 months received over $400 million in funding. And so that's this last 12 months. And on the show, on the webinar today, we've got 2 of the tech companies that were in the index and then also got the funding. But what we're going to be looking at is what is the narrative of that? Like, what does that really mean for the industry and the sort of the tech consolidation that we have across hospitality tech? And when we look at hospitality tech, we look at hotel tech and short-term rental tech. So the guests that we have on this webinar come from both sides of that hospitality paradigm. But one of the things that we want to talk about and explore is that what's happening with this capital and what's that sort of clear pattern that we're seeing with the PMSs getting all this funding. It's a really big shift that has implications for everybody within the ecosystem. So not just the tech companies and the big platforms themselves, but also the point solutions and the operators as well. So we're going to be discussing all things around consolidation. And today on the webinar, I have 3 guests. The first I'd love to introduce, who is Wouter Gertz, who is Director of Market Research at Muse. Thank you so much for joining us today, Wouter. And Muse was the biggest recipient of funding in the last investment in the last 12 months. So thank you for taking the time and joining us on the webinar today. And then next we have Richard Vorton, who is the co-founder at Yes Consulting, and a advisor within the short-term rental tech industry, but also from the operator side as well. So Richard, thank you very much for joining me on this webinar. And next I have Boris Pavlov, who is co-founder and CEO of On Season and Calry. And you also are in the index because you received funding in the last 12 months as well, perhaps on a different scale to Muse. You're both sort of on the different scales of the amounts, but thank you so much for coming. And really, really looking forward to having this discussion with you. So thank you, all of you.
Thanks for having us.
So to set and sort of start the scene, I guess, is the index showed that PMSs are attracting more capital than any other category. So from a market research perspective, what is driving that, do you think? And do you think it's going to be a few winners take all, or is there room for sort of multiple platforms to coexist? And what I might actually point out here is that we've had the 7 PMSs over the last 12 months. The 12 months before that, we also had big funding round for Hostaway on the STR side and Apaleo as well on the hotel tech side. But actually, I might start with you, Richard, here. What's your view here? It's a tricky one, but I'm going to hand it to you first.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting you to hand it to me first, with a lot of money on the right-hand side of my screen. Um, I, I, I probably come from a slightly different perspective on this to many people, and it's probably based on age as much as anything else. You know, we have witnessed over the period of the last 20, 30 years that large scale businesses are the ones that actually dominate. So I think there's a definite psychological trend for these things, and it's not just because technology is hard to build and it's getting a lot easier through large language models and Claude and everything else. It's because it is actually very difficult to sell and support and maintain an architecture and an infrastructure that you can continue to develop and build on and actually have the wherewithal and the skills to actually know where it's going, or at least know within a very short period of time how you're going to have to modify that. So you have seen these very big companies like Muse and Apple.io and Guesty and everybody else. And as you know, I'm a board advisor to Boom, yet another one that has seen funding too. So I am actually a believer that big companies will be the ones that actually dominate the space. We got 600 to 1,000 PMSs at the moment out there. There will still be a lot of little ones out there, and they will be geographically centered. They might be in a particular language, one of 30 European languages, maybe, but they will find it harder and harder to actually exist in this space as the industry moves forward, I believe.
Wouter, anything from your perspective on there to add?
Sure. How long do you have? Um, no, I think I mean I totally agree with Richard. I think from my point of view, I think that your question around why PMSs get investment. I mean, I think there's obviously different pockets of technology that get investment, but the PMS is and always has been, I guess, a core piece of technology. Even though some others might not agree with me, I think it is the operational hub of running a hotel or a short term rental, and it is sort of that bridge between this increasingly digital world, but still needing a logistical. Physical presence, obviously, in your property, and being able to bridge that. And so, I think the PMS has uh, managed as a category to remain very much at the center of everything else that's happening, and um, be the player that has a lot of the data and is able to process a lot of the payments and on all of these things, which frankly, to an investor, is really an interesting business. And so this is probably why a PMS and PMSs are getting the funding that they do. But I agree also with Richard in terms of fragmentation. It is an extremely fragmented market. I remember 10, 15 years ago, we talked about, oh, probably in 5 years, there's only going to be 4 players left or whatever. That didn't happen. It's probably not going to happen. And you can see when something new happens, like AI innovation, all of a sudden was on our doorsteps. And you see a lot of new startups coming up again, and different existing PMSs respond to that differently, and therefore some of them might go down, some might go up. But there's always space probably for smaller players as well. But yes, I think the trend slowly, very slowly, is going to some consolidation. But I think there's always space for a lot of other players as well.
It's really interesting because also over the years that I've been in the space, it's always very bullish on consolidation, but we've yet to really see it, certainly at any kind of pace. Boris, do you have anything that you would like to add to that? What's your thoughts there?
Well, likewise, I agree that we've been expecting consolidation to happen and it's still not happening. But I do believe that the large players in the industry are going to be able to um, get some of the smaller ones, especially now when everybody's either going to an industry standard sort of very well developed solution or trying to vibe code their own thing. So I think there'll be more and more separation in between the truly professional property management systems and the small niche individual systems that are literally going to be created by the property manager or a hotelier for themselves and for their own purpose and needs.
So, okay, great. That's interesting. What I want to now explore with you is that it sort of feels quite clear what the PMSs are doing as well, and what that money's being spent on. So it might be developing in-house capabilities of what might have been previously a point solution, might be buying a point solution, or it is still, of course, partnering for particular point solutions that have capabilities that it's very difficult to develop yourself. But how do you think we should be defining between a platform and a point solution in 2026? And is it getting clearer or more blurred? And maybe, Boris, this is something that you could start with here.
Yeah, so we come from a very interesting perspective where, I mean, first of all, we are the earliest stage company in your list with the lowest amount of funding, but also at the earliest stage. And we're trying to do something that hasn't been done before. We're looking at consolidation from a different perspective, from the perspective of unifying the existing solutions, meaning creating this unified layer that sits on top of PMSs and partners up with the existing PMSs so that because we appreciate that every individual PMS has a perfect, unique client for them. So Muse might be great for boutique hotels, for example, is the best PMS in the world for boutique hotels, whereas Boom might be very good for small operators of vacation rentals that want to harness AI. So we connect to both. And we believe that the next frontier of everything that we do as a hospitality industry would be trying to improve distribution and getting a technological consolidation in place rather than a financial one or just a few PMSs buying out the smaller ones. So that's where we stand, a layer on top of the PMSs, trying to aggregate everything, not just data, but also inventory and push this inventory to whatever the future distribution places will be and interfaces and outlets will be. So I do believe there is a lot of space for the PMS as a tool that is used by the operator that sits within its operations. Like the CPU of any operator for me is the PMS. But in terms of distribution, there needs to be a more consolidated solution, and that's our whole rationale and thesis of building what we're building at OnSeason.
But what about other point solutions? Like, is there space today for other point solutions, or is it that the PMS, will develop that themselves or buy it? Like, Richard, what's your views here?
Yeah, I'm quite opinionated on this part as well because there are point solutions that actually have a moat around them, and they are things like insurance companies. Even though Inhabit has an insurance company, it's a very, very hard thing to construct yourself. Okay. Websites, for example, many PMSs build templated websites. Websites are very, very personally important to people. And as far as I'm concerned, they should be open source and everybody should be allowed to build their own front end using the technology, the PMS behind it. But there are so many, probably 12 different categories led probably by guest apps that we are seeing flooding the market right now. And they all have to access the booking information. And the booking information, and this is the silo, is actually the PMS. So with Boris, distribution is one of the, don't forget, I used to own a PMS, so I know how much pain there is here. The distribution layer of a PMS is incredibly important. You're not going to get any of the big OTAs saying, well, you've got 25 properties you can connect into directly into Airbnb. It just doesn't happen. It's not worth their while to maintain the architectures. So you are going to have these very big forces in a PMS. You're going to have financial management. You're going to have distribution in there. You're going to have payment solutions. Payment solutions are one of the bigger things right now. All PMSs are going to have payment solutions attached. You're trapped. Insurances, websites, and a few other things you can connect in, but it is easy to develop. And let's face it, right now, everybody is using Claude and various coding tools and even vibe coding. They will start developing these and replacing their connected solutions. I know people don't like to hear this, but if I owned a PMS right now and somebody had a few thousand customers out there and I could vibe code it, well, not vibe code, if I could code it myself internally, I'd replace it overnight and take the money myself. It's commercial reality, these types of things. So, what I will say is there are so many companies out there thinking they can break into the market and take market share, and they will for a period of time. It's going to be incredibly tough to do the sales and the support and maintain the architecture and continue to develop and still have that liability of attachment to a PMS, who actually, between them, they will have over $1 billion investment. So, yeah, it's tough.
It's tough out there. Wouter, what's your view here? What is the future for point solutions within hospitality tech?
Um, I think there's always a place for them. I think obviously I'm looking at this through muse tinted glasses, if that's a word. I think if you look at the history, and I'm obviously more in the hotel space, and I think that the history of technology in hotels is longer, I suppose, than in short-term rentals even. And there was always this kind of idea of, okay, you have legacy systems that can do a lot of different things, but they're not so fast with innovation. You start sort of locked in, and sort of, you as a hotelier, as an operator, or as a short-term rental operator, you kind of have to compromise on certain things, right? And then point solutions sort of came as an alternative to that, because they were much more specialized, best in breed. But I think what we're starting to realize is that, yes, they can work very well, but then you have other issues. So data silos, integrations, connectivity. How much issues have we had with integrations and trying to improve that kind of play? So there's, I guess, up to now, and I don't think we've found a solution yet, but there's always been that sort of that false choice, if you like, of, okay, I either have to go for an all-in-one solution or a best of breed sort of point solutions, and try and stitch them together. Neither of them really works for me as an operator. And so I'm not saying that Muse is the solution to all of this, but we are really thinking through, okay, what is it that we're really trying to offer here? And I think we are not looking at, okay, we need to have the longest feature lists. What we really would like to have is sort of this idea of, okay, we are building the data foundation for operators, so that they have a single source of sort of guest data, booking data, payment data, stay data, all in one place, and so that they can actually use the data that's not spread out in different systems and fragmented all over the place, but actually a place where that could be used and intelligently used. And so we build certain features that we believe are core to that, and we should have it, and or we don't believe there's a player out there that sort of is doing that today or can replicate what we can directly into our PMS. But at the same time, we have a marketplace of over 1,000 players. We have an open API so that people can integrate easily into our systems, and can use the data as well. And so what we're seeing is that actually there's a lot of operators that either work with certain vendors or have built their own proprietary tech, and they come to Muse, and they integrate those technologies with the Muse system, and actually it makes everything better rather than it competing in some way. Because if you can attach, say, your loyalty program or your CRM that you've already have, or you've built yourself, into a system that knows more about your guest, because it knows the booking, it knows your credit card, it knows payment, actually the data becomes richer and what you can do with it becomes richer. And so that's the story we tell, of course. That's our narrative, and that's what we're hoping to achieve. And with AI, that sort of probably becomes quicker and quicker, but also more and more important, because not fragmented data, not good data. AI doesn't really like it, and so you're not going to be able to achieve anything if you don't have that. So that's where I suppose, where we sit today, and that's what we're trying to achieve.
And I suppose solving that same challenge, but in a very different way, would be Apaleo, which is a totally sort of open system that is solving that kind of challenge of data speaking to each other as well. But from
Yeah.
a operator perspective, so and we can look at it this both from like the hotel side and the short-term rental side. Is like what is the experience for the operator on whether having sort of best of breed or marketplace as well? And sometimes I think in the short-term rental space, typically it's smaller operators that are um, compared to sort of the hotels. They're smaller businesses, perhaps. I mean, not always, but potentially smaller businesses. But then also on the short-term rental side, what we have over there compared to hotels is far more complexity in operations than a hotel side. So I wonder if there's nuances between the two sides of hospitality here from an operator perspective, that it makes a difference whether there is tech consolidation or not, or whether it's marketplace PMSs or best of breed or all in one or whatever. Richard, what are your thoughts here from a short-term rental viewpoint?
Yeah, I speak to a lot of managers, and just this week I've spoken to quite a few about their tech stacks. And I say on average they're using between 6 and 7 different software systems to actually run their business, and they've built those up over a 2, 3, 4 year period. And you'd think, because of the experience they've had, they'd all be perfect for them. And yet, I can say that 50% of the systems they're actually using, they're very unhappy with, because they've become legacy systems. Their connectivity that Wouter was talking about is a problem to them. They're failing in certain aspects of the maintenance and support and everything else. So, and we haven't even mentioned, well, we've mentioned once the word AI here, and that's kind of it's in the shadows, because I don't think everybody wants to talk about it too much at the moment. But this is you know, this is the part of the business now that is pulling together all the data elements. If you don't have all the data, then your AI agent or your AI tool doesn't have the capacity to actually do everything it needs to do to give you the very best results. We're seeing it in communications, we're seeing it in pricing now, we're seeing it in operational management, we're seeing it in all the repetitive tasks that humans have to do, and it's doing it better and better and better. So these third-party legacy systems which are connected, I think a number of them are probably in trouble right now, because they were invented before COVID, before AI was even kind of really mentioned. Post this period, we're now seeing AI, agent intelligence, consolidation of information as being the tool of use, which means you're going to need all the data in the same place. And AI to AI connectivity is not terribly good at the moment. So I see that as a consolidation move, and anybody who wins the AI game with the best agents are the ones going to pick up most of the customers as time moves on. So yeah, I'm afraid we are in a transition period, and AI has actually caused the problem or the benefit.
Boris, do you have any?
Okay.
Oh, Wouter, did you want to jump in?
Well, I don't want to steal Boris's time, but just to like continue on what Richard was saying as well. I totally agree that I don't think it's uh, short-term rental tech is different in that sense from hotel tech. I think it's both moving in the direction of uh, consolidation, and yes, certain players being left behind because of all the innovation that's happening. And but in both spaces, like you mentioned as well, not all hotels are open to Muse. Not all short-term rentals are open to Boom. Like there's Apoleo is a very good competitor of ours, and there's hotels that um, are much better suited for Apoleo than they are for Muse, but vice versa, right? And so there's always space for a lot of different uh, software providers because there are so many different types of accommodation providers and operators. And so I don't think that game has necessarily changed. I totally agree with what Richard is saying on the fact that the innovation is moving so rapidly does leave certain players behind, but it's not because they focus on certain operators or others. It's more because operators will want to go with the latest technology, and if you can't keep up with that, then yes, you are left behind.
Yeah, it's a really good point that you've made there. Boris, any thoughts from you here?
Yeah, well, as Richard was speaking, I couldn't help but think about the bad side of innovation. And that's also because of a recent example that I saw. Now everyone thinks that they can create their own software. And don't get me wrong, I'm one of the first users of Lovable ever, even before it became Lovable. And I've been a huge proponent for vibe coding, but then I keep seeing people thinking that they can just vibe code everything that they need. And while they may be able to do that for themselves, an operator can easily vibe code, I don't know, even a CRM for managing guests. They suddenly get the idea that they can sell this as a software product to other operators. And I believe that's how we got in the first place to have so many property management systems. Operators couldn't find a perfect system for themselves, so they decided, hey, I'm going to go ahead and build one. So you ended up having maybe 1,000 property management systems only in Europe. And I think the same thing is happening right now. You have operators vibe coding things left and right that work for their own operations. Usually these are point solutions sitting on top of the PMS, but they most of them get the idea that they can start selling this as software as a service to other operators, and that's where things are going to get pretty bad, if you ask me. So I think we need to be very cautious, and every operator needs to do their due diligence when choosing the right technology stack, because they could choose a Frankensteiny software, not which is not AI native, which is closed. The closed system doesn't have an open API and does not want to interact with other third-party ancillary services. But they could also fall in the trap of using a flashy, new, sparkly tool that a fellow operator just created a month ago, and it will turn out that there's a very, very serious security issues, maintenance issues, and the tool probably doesn't even work for that other use case. So that's what I wanted to flag here on this topic.
I think that compliance, governance, security data is an issue that is not talked about nearly enough at the moment when we come to AI um, and data. And it's something that I think it will probably be a bit of a rude awakening, perhaps for many companies. I mean, not just in this space, but across the board as well. But Boris, on your point there, like if you are just vibe coding something for your own business, other than you do need to be, mindful, especially if you're using other people's data, other people's information, your guests, your owners, that for happy days, if it's a sort of a workaround that makes your business better, easier, happy days. But I think the danger then is what is what you sort of said, is if it's like, oh well, this could be a product that I can now sell to others, because it's actually really easy to sort of just use AI to create a brand and create a website. The barriers to selling anything, or at least appearing to sell anything, are much lower than perhaps they used to be. But that, I just want to sort of move kind of still talk about data, but sort of move on that data sort of conversation a little bit more. I think it's also, is it like with data ownership, is it becoming a moat for operators, do you think? Like, is it a way of differentiating a business is having, being able to really understand your data, not have it siloed, have it all in the right way that it needs to be? Or is it something that we're not really seeing now? And Richard, would you like to go here?
Yeah, and when you say data with operators, I mean, the vast majority of people who actually have data in their systems don't even look upon it as data. They're actually sitting on an incredibly valuable piece of information. And they often don't use it if they're an operator or manager in short-term rentals, but it is actually being used by the PMS systems and the dynamic pricing systems and the revenue management companies and the payment solutions to actually elicit more money, of course. We're going to come back to this. If you've got data in your system and you are using AI intelligence of any description, you are going to have the capacity to actually blend this data into very useful information for you. So if I went back to 2000 and whatever it was with the first management company in 2006, we didn't have any of this. It was spreadsheets and all sorts of things. But now, just imagine now you can actually use this data to say, I've got a website from on season from Boris, for example. It's actually projecting out the price because the owner said they will take a discount for this period because the occupancy is down. And you can match that with your dynamic pricing tools and a payment solution, and a discount. You can do it all on the fly because you've got a brain that actually will do all that human thought processes in the blink of an eye. So this business intelligence is incredibly important, and you can actually pull out reports on the fly, which are extremely useful to you that would have taken a phone call to a software developer to write an SQL um, program to actually pull that report out. So yeah, the data is getting more and more and more important. And I think it's becoming even more important when you start looking at things like OTA pricing, distribution pricing, revenue management, and everything else. Because we've moved from dynamic pricing tools, and there's a few big companies out there, there's Price Labs and Wheelhouse and Beyond and all these sorts of things, to them now saying you need a revenue manager. It's only 2 or 3 years away before that revenue manager is now replaced by AI. So, and you need data for that. If you don't have all the data in the system, you're not going to be able to make intelligent decisions. So, hugely important. I just don't think many people actually think about it at the moment.
Something to say on that, Richard, and this is very specific to the short-term rental sector rather than the hotel. In the past, operators would have seen contracts with owners as being the gold, like the absolute essence of the business. But perhaps you're advocating for something a little different here. It's looking at your data as the gold. Obviously, the contracts are still incredibly important, but actually it's the data that sits behind everything that is actually the gold.
Well, it's your own gold. It's only mines and pots of gold if you're actually consolidating via a third party. So you can imagine a very large PMS uses, I don't know how many hotels they've got, but they must have a mountain of data available, which means they've actually got information that is going to be used or is possibly already used by dynamic pricing companies because they need that information. It's a little pot of gold for yourself. Don't ever mistake the fact that people want owner contracts with great owners, but that data allows you to convince your owner that what you're doing is very professional and based on information, and you are telling them the truth. You're not just spinning them a yarn. So yes, it is a gem in your armory. There's no doubt about that.
So a gem rather than gold.
Can I just comment on this as well? Just to clarify that we have 15,000 customers. Um, they own their own data, and we do not sell it to any third party or anything like that. So just just to be clear, I don't think Richard you meant that, but just to make sure that that's on record. But I totally agree that data is becoming more and more important, and we talked about it. I don't think it necessarily has changed so much though. I mean, we 10, 20 years ago we talked about segmentation, then it became personalization, hyper personalization, and now with AI you can have AI enabled personalization, whatever we might want to call it. But we've been talking about this for a very long time, and it's data has always been at the center of that idea. It's just that maybe it's the technology that's like counteracting this drive towards better data and less fragmentation, or maybe it's the mindset of the operators or whatever it might be. I, I I totally agree with data is becoming more and more important, but I don't think it's a new concept. We've been talking about this for a very long time.
Boris, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think relative to technology, data has become a lot more valuable, and I think that's the point where we're towards which we're talking here. Because I agree with Walter. It's always been super important data, but in the past, technology and being able to build the right technology fast enough to meet the needs of your customers, that was a moat. It no longer is. Anyone can build any sort of technology. So if we're talking about modes today, I would place data very up high, technology very, very down low. So it's data, it's distribution, even the brand has become more important, in my opinion, than the technology because anyone can build the tech. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on the topic.
Data was always very difficult to use. And, I've had a couple of management companies. It was always, how are we going to market this segment? How do we do the email? How do we do a drip feed on it? How do we metricize the results of it? Now you can just do it just by talking to your PMS, which is incredible, it's a revelation.
So, as AI becomes more central to operations, who should own the data that trains and improves the model? So, whether it is AI within a PMS or whether it is AI on an OTA platform, like who should do that? Should it be the operator, the PMS, or an AI provider? Where does that all sit here?
I would say it sits with the AI labs. They are the ones responsible for training models, and ultimately, if any company, even from our industry, and regardless of how big the company is, even the new size, if they start creating their own model, I don't think they'll create something better than the AI labs. How is that data used exactly? And how do we get more? How do we make AI more useful for us? Well, we need to share data with the AI. We need to have this data delivered somehow to the lab so that AI models can be trained on. Whose responsibility would that be? I honestly do not know. Maybe Richard, do you have any idea?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're walking into where we need a lawyer. It's always a bad place to be. So, um, I think what might be good for all of us is to go and read the terms and conditions of all the companies actually using your data right now and see. If you start with the OTAs, I think we'll probably find out who actually owns the data.
And I think it's very important to mention here that don't just go and throw your guest data into an OpenAI chat and start seeing what it can do with it, because obviously that's one of the most dangerous things to start doing.
So that's actually why it's so important to actually use a established, thought through specialist tech for those kind of needs that you might have, or that business intelligence as well, rather than just using ChatGPT.
Well, I can give you a tiny story on that. So, a bit like Boris, I've been using Replit and Lovable and anti gravity, and I've been vibe coding endless things, CRMs, websites, everything else. And I showed it to my son, who's actually a very proficient software developer. And he just looked at it and went, Dad, what have you done? That is just so bad. Such terrible architecture. I thought, yeah, well, I've been directed down that line to use these particular tools from the services of these vibe coding. And I didn't, I mean, I've run it. PMS company. I know nothing about coding, unfortunately. So it was like, well, yeah, you just expose yourself to the world, you know, uh, don't launch that. So- and that's a real risk. And Boris said it earlier. And I think we're in real danger here. So if you're actually going to adopt a system, make sure that the company actually behind that system actually has the weight and the authority and the experience on the software development behind it to do it. And I will say one other thing in this industry is if you're going to adopt any technology company, make sure their balance sheet is strong enough to actually withstand a period of a downturn. So we've witnessed some real damage in COVID. So that's one of the questions I think everybody should ask too.
I think there's a lot of opportunity as well. Like we are actively building. Obviously, we have a big R&D team that builds all of the infrastructure. And I think they would agree that they wouldn't let let anyone vibe code any of that. But at the same time, we are looking at how can we enable hoteliers within our platform to build their own agents, for example, because the hotelier has certain knowledge about their property and their operations and how they want to do certain things that no one else has, and there's no system that can build all of that bespoke for them. So if we can allow people to vibe code in a very safe environment and automate certain tasks or workflows or whatever it might be, I think there's a real benefit to that, an opportunity to that. But I totally agree that obviously there's other steps beyond that that we should be very careful with.
I want to move on actually and think about the next 12 months or the next 24 months. And we're going to publish another Hospitality Tech Investment Index in 12 months and another one in 24 months after that. What would you expect to see in that from an investment perspective? What do you think that the investment side of things will be? Where's the money going to go, and what might be changed or different?
I would start here by saying I would expect to see a lot more infrastructure and distribution plays. Because in our industry, in short-term rentals, we're the only ones, and I'm still surprised we're the only ones because that's the next frontier for me. So I would expect to see a lot more infrastructure products that allow AI to securely function and accomplish the objectives of its users. I really like actually Muse approach where they are going to let their users use AI within the system so that it's guardrailed sort of naturally. But yeah, that's when it comes to the PMS. When it comes to everything else, we would see more infrastructure and distribution plays trying to cut the middleman, the OTAs, because in the day and age we are with AI, I don't think OTA fees are justified. That's a personal opinion of mine. I think there's going to be a few different players, I don't know who they are today, who are going to try and sort of mm, reduce OTA reliance for operators, both on the hotel and on the short-term rental side.
So it's really ripe for disruption, that aspect of things. Richard, what would be your prediction?
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with Boris because the distribution part of everybody's industry is all about bringing bookings in and getting exposure and building a brand. And we are increasingly trapped within the very large platform silos. And I think everybody's trying to escape that. There's a lot of money in it. And I think Boris is right. We don't know where it is. It's a bit foggy. It's a bit misty out there. Um, I actually love what Wood has said as well about the fact that Mused is also building within its own architecture and infrastructure the equivalent of vibe coding to build your own products, but will have guardrails within it and they will have access to your own data. So, you've got a superior model there in those companies that do that, which kind of indicates to me that the big will always get bigger and the small will struggle more. So I would actually see more money going into companies like Muse and Apple.io and Boom and Hostaway and Guestia, the big guys. Um, because the world has always shown that the larger companies with the scalability of money do actually win the game. And we're not talking these days about scale without profit. We're talking about companies that are scaling, actually trying to make money at the same time. So I think this Frankenstein thing is quite interesting. Boris Karloff, I think he was like 1935. Frankenstein was quite an obscene monster with a bolt through his neck. I actually watched the latest Frankenstein movie, and he's a much more beautiful creature, and you can bolt on lovely arms and things like that, but he still went crazy. So I don't think there's going to be a great deal of money going into all the peripheral services as there would be into the enterprise level. So,
Wouter, finally, for you, anything to add? What do you think we'll see in the next 12, 24 months?
Um, I I think riffing off of what Boris and Richard already said as well. I think distribution for sure. If I take that a step further, I guess financial management, if you like, and sort of helping operators with that extremely boring but very essential part of their business. So it's about distribution and making that better, but it's also about your financial health, and fintech solutions, of course, is a big thing for us. And there's definitely a lot of potential there. So especially for investors, they are really interested in that element as well. And so um, we do a lot with payments already, but things like foreign exchange, banking, loans, credit cards, all these kind of things. We can you can keep going on that side of things, and actually produce or disrupt a whole other segment that today is still run a lot by payment processors and banks that run on older technology. So I think especially for smaller operators, there's a real benefit potentially for software companies to provide a solution that is bespoke and made for the hospitality industry.
Brilliant, guys. It's time for us to wrap up. And thank you, all of you, Richard, Wouter, Boris, for coming and sharing your insights on this webinar. Thank you so much. And thank you to our audience.